Well, it's a bit weird. I recently changed out the lights. I think the lumens on these are lower than my previous ones, but the other ones were probably a lot older. Anyways, this is the only anime I have for today. Basically, the two things that were scheduled to be released today didn't ship, which kind of surprised me. It basically means I don't know if it's going to arrive by tomorrow or not, so might as well just do what I can with what I have today. So, we'll start with Naruto Shippuden DVD set 31. You know, pretty stereotypical, simple inside. And Samurai Warrior, which is an interesting release just because this, I think, has kind of been on the horizon for a long time now. Like, I thought I might have pre-ordered it half a year ago. Which makes me think, you know, this is a Funimation DVD only release. I guess down there it looks like we're seeing a... Oh, so I guess this might have a dub. Interesting. It seems to me like it hasn't been as high a priority, but whatever. Anyways, this has finally arrived. It's finally taken off of my on-order list. Outside of that, there are a couple of other things to go through. We do have another hentai release, The Devil's Virgins. And I guess Soft Cell is the name to remember here because they're actually releasing these. It's kind of nice because usually it's been re-releases of really old stuff. So new stuff is coming out. I don't know the licensing details of what gets chosen, but it's nice to finally have new stuff coming out, even though I don't catch up on all the old stuff either. So, I guess then I have a couple non-anime stuff. We got season 1 of Better Call Saul. Basically, my friend's been watching it, saying it's generally been reviewing better than Breaking Bad itself was. So, you know, this is kind of the first step towards me maybe finally catching up, although I think season 3 may have recently aired. I don't know. This is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm not sure which version I actually have here, because it says BBC. The 2 there I don't think is related to the region coding, and I've not seen... Well, I don't know if this is a legitimate version, if this is a US version, or imported version. I probably should have looked more carefully, but this is the version of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that I grew up on, so it's kind of neat to have that. Haven't rewatched it, but whatever. This is kind of the main motivator for buying a lot of these non-anime stuff, is looking at stuff and at non-anime stuff, realizing I missed the release of Venture Brothers Season 6. Although, granted, I haven't even watched up to Season 5, but whatever. And then I got the Beetlejuice animated series, which, you know, I've rewatched a couple of the episodes. The openings, of course, are completely legit, and the series itself is pretty great, actually, as far as I can tell. I think I know where my love of puns might have come from, because I don't recall my dad telling that many, so I'm wondering if this series is actually responsible for that. Oh well, anyways, without the other 2 things that we're going to re-release today, I knew this would be small. So here's this week's anime DVD collection update.
Oh, yeah, that light really is bright. I'm going to have to see how this comes out on the camera. Kind of hard to tell, but let's get on to the stuff that y'all are probably more interested in. So, anime I did watch Naruto Shippuden DVD set 31 with my friend. Content-wise, I think there was a bit of flashbacky stuff. Some of it was actually, I thought, pretty good, because it kind of tied into the main character, sort of. The other one was okay, I guess, with some stupid stuff in there being said. Present day stuff was fine, cool, neat, but, you know, it's been a mix of those, I guess, because the series kind of has to find things to do while the original manga's being wrapped up. I mean, I think it has been, and Boruto has started, but at the time these episodes were airing, I think that's what they were having to do. It was okay, and just unfortunate that I think it didn't stop at a necessarily notable place. Oh well, next up was School Live, unless that's supposed to be School Live, and this one was actually a pretty interesting series. I'm not sure if I want to talk about why, because if you know why, then you know why. But if you don't, it's actually the sort of thing where probably be best if you actually put in an episode. It's just so that you can kind of experience how it plays with you in that first episode. It was fun enough that I've actually shown it to a couple of friends, and it was kind of interesting how one friend actually sort of picked up on it. But the fact that, you know, I was just bringing it up to him out of the blue kind of let him know. And the fact that y'all are hearing me say this kind of lets you know it's got a little more of a twist to it than it tries to put on. Because if it was just that, it actually would have been kind of mediocre, I guess. It didn't seem all that great. It's been better going back to it, and overall it was a pretty neat series, but I guess I can't really talk too much about the details. In fact, maybe I've already said too much. But basically, I guess the way I would say this, if cute girls doing cute things doesn't put you off, then you might want to give it a shot without reading too much about it if you're not already familiar with it. Or at least give the first episode a shot. It'd be really nice if Sentai actually made that first episode really easy to view, because I think that would be a good way to make people interested in the series. But maybe there's other ways to watch it. I don't know. Next up, I watched the Seven Deadly Sins Season 1 Part 2, and it was pretty good. I think if there's one criticism I would have with the Seven Deadly Sins, so I talked before about how it kind of felt like it was at risk of slowing down because of a shonen-y sort of thing, and kind of gave me a vague fairy tale vibe. Not that fairy tale had necessarily slowed down. I'd only watched a little bit of it, but I don't know that there was much story progression from the parts I watched. There was stuff that happened, and pacing-wise, I didn't remember it being necessarily bad. And that all comes around to this, because Seven Deadly Sins sets itself up with a goal in mind, and you can kind of feel like it's threatening to get easily distracted like that stuff. And it is worthwhile to think of fairy tale, because I think maybe it actually said somewhere on here, because somewhere I thought it said from the people who made fairy tale made this, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the case. It just, I don't know. I consider that potential confirmation bias on my part, just because I sort of thought, and then I maybe saw somebody else say it, and you never know. When they say the people who worked on, usually it is the same people, but there's been plenty of times when it's been like, oh, funded by the same people who funded something or the other, and that doesn't necessarily tell you that the direction or the writing or the character designs are all going to be the same as that other thing as well. And maybe it means that they were all back together working on it, and maybe it means they didn't lose their charm or something like that. So it's kind of weird. Anyways, that's all kind of weird, distraction-y stuff. When it comes to the contents of this, like I said, it was pretty good. I like the fact that even though it kind of threatened going off track, it didn't. It stays a little confrontationally, like they created strong characters, and they have to make sure we, the audience, always think that they're coming up against really strong people. So there's a kind of stress there that's omnipresent that could turn some people off of it. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. If there's only any complaint I would have about the stuff here, it's that I don't care for the character design of one character. I mean, part of the problem is they didn't really introduce much about us to that character anyways. And I don't know if I want to say too much, because I'm not sure what expectations I want people to have or not have going in here. But outside of that, I think I've liked most of the character designs. They've been fun. When they don't seem initially impressive, usually there's something else that comes up, and that's why I was saying, I guess for this one character, they just never did that. So, anyways, good watch. And then I started watching Hentai Collection, or Cankole Fleet Girls Collection. I don't know, Hentai Collection, and I think I was picking up why last week when I first saw this I was saying, oh yes, I've seen a lot of images of these people, why don't I recognize any of these people? I think it's because she was the only person I would recognize here. Like, the cast of potential characters they have is big enough that I think a lot of the imagery I tend to see tends to focus on some of the more extreme characters. Extremely busty or extremely lolly or something like that. And for some reason, I guess a lot of the characters in the middle get left out, except for that one crazy girl who's kind of scantily clad. I don't remember names. Fubuki's the only one I remember, and that's because I guess I've heard the name a lot. So, content-wise, it's kind of hard to tell how much I've been enjoying this, just because, you know, I've been aware of its existence kind of in the recesses of the internet floating forward, I guess. That's the only way I could think of describing it. And in that regard, it's kind of interesting to see the personalities of a lot of these characters, when a lot of stuff I've seen has made it kind of tricky to tell what kind of personalities they'd actually have in the first place. And at the same time, content-wise, it's very weird. It reminds me of the first time when I watched Strike Witches. I mean, obviously, this isn't too dissimilar from Strike Witches as a concept, because Strike Witches was kind of, oh, well, they're witches and they're flying around, except they are designed to be kind of very airplane-like. Now, I don't know if they were designed off of real airplanes, but it's definitely the case that you kind of get this weird thing when they're flying through the air and they're making an airplane flying through the air sound because of the leg gear they're wearing, but it doesn't feel, the physics don't feel right. And I think this one kind of turns that up to 11, I guess, with the, they're always on the water and the threat of potentially sinking, and their movements and their firing. It's like the physics don't feel like they make sense. And I'm not even quite sure, because I think it gave the impression that traditional ships weren't working, and only these girls who were essentially the reborn spirits of certain ships could. I don't quite feel it. You know, some anime you can feel, oh yes, they've introduced this world situation. Evangelion is probably a really good example, because, you know, they kind of lampshade this. The angels represent a kind of different way of thinking of warfare, because an individual angel is almost overpowering of an entire fleet, I guess. I mean, they had to, I'm thinking of that one episode, and I don't know if I'm explaining it right. And there was a part of me that held back on what I was explaining, because I don't want to spoil certain ideas of Evangelion in case nobody's watched it. I don't know. It's weird in that way. Outside of that, though, I'm finding the difference between the hand-drawn stuff and the CGI doesn't seem to be that bad. The CGI seems to have gotten better. You can kind of still tell it is, but it's not that bad. Animation-wise, flowing-wise, look-wise, you know, it looks pretty decent. I'm not sure if I would call the battles too exciting per se. They work fine for when they happen. There's just some things that confuse me a lot more than when Strike Witches was doing stuff, which says a lot considering Strike Witches is confusing until you kind of hear rumors that the original writer of the manga or something like that just did not like or was not able to draw pants or something, so that's why pretty much every character is pantless. Sounds like a weird excuse, but you know, you take that weird sort of thing and you compare and contrast it to, they talk about this kind of naval strategy they have for luring characters out to the specific point in the sea, and I can't help but think But these guys aren't really ships, so they don't really have built-in maps. They're just individual girls, kind of on, not exactly jet skis, but I can't help but think of it that way. And it's like, they don't even establish this weird thing that like the certain scientific railgun and magical index series suggests, where their espers are supposedly doing really complex mathematics in their head as part of materializing their esper powers. So that's why some of them can do things that are just ridiculously super advanced, and not like, oh well, they just realized something additional about their power, but like just control the intricate details of their power. And there doesn't seem to be anything here, so I can't help but think, well, how are these people so sure? Because the distances regarding oceans generally are big enough such that an individual person on jet skis won't be able to necessarily do much. So there's some weird contradictions going on there. Watching the story itself unfold, I'm about halfway through, and the Abyssals are definitely a very interesting curiosity, but the show isn't doing a whole lot to feed that mystery and to make us more curious or reveal information and stuff like that. So I've kind of always guessed that the Abyssals have been the bad guys, just because they kind of looked villain-esque, I guess, from imagery I've seen. I didn't even know they were called the Abyssals. I just kind of knew, oh look, there's all these ship-like things with teeth. Those don't look like they're good guys. And I can't help but wonder, is it like Strike Witches where they're really a other, or do they represent something else entirely? The show's got me curious, but it's more exploring the characters. It's got a lot of characters, a lot of ground to cover. And it's got a main character, so it seems like I was mostly thinking of this stuff while watching it, mostly because these are curiosities and questions I had that it definitely wasn't exploring. I wonder why that's kind of in the lower 7s. Our main character, she's growing okay, pretty well, but we're not really seeing anything that makes it a super, super awesome, definite thing, I guess. It's just mostly it's neat to see her kind of grow. I say kind of grow, but don't mistake that for those anime where they try to pretend that a character grew and the character didn't grow. No, she's definitely growing in capabilities and understanding, which gives the impression that maybe she was, I don't know, the history is a little more lost in the main character as well. Some of the people in the fleet are irredeemable pieces of crap. I don't know how to identify the one character I would really just like to sock. You know? I'm thinking of, like, what was that movie? Straight Metal Jacket, where I think they have the idea of if there is somebody who causes problems, then other people in that group take care of it, make sure that person falls in line if they're dragging people down, if they're horrible people. And I can't help but think, out of so many people I've seen in anime, that person seems like they need a large dose of reality. Basically, outside of her, there's been a lot of annoyances, but nobody necessarily problematic. So maybe that's the other possibility. It's kind of like all this stuff circles around the idea of maybe there's nothing that necessarily grabs your attention per se, which might also explain why the second season gets better. I mean, there's a couple possibilities for that. First of all, anybody who watched the first season didn't like it and didn't go on to the second season, that would probably tend to cause the second season to want to accumulate more. But at the same time, it means that maybe it's a second season when they start really exploring stuff. And that actually sounds like it'd be kind of similar to Strike Witches, because I kind of remember the second season is when they started really exploring stuff and when it started becoming neat as well. Which is an interesting observation, I guess. But, I don't know, that's enough about this. I need to finish it to kind of come up with a full view of or understanding of it. Outside of that, I can't think of a whole lot of other stuff. Even video game wise, I haven't really been doing much. I think I've just been zoning out a lot. I'm wondering if it's an age thing. But I have been making Pokemon progress, so I finally got all the Ultra Beasts that I've captured so far up to level 100, and all the trained Ultra Beasts up to level 100, and I've gotten all of their stats, so now I'm able to finally start doing other stuff, which also includes focusing a little on the battle tree again, because I needed some BP for items, and now I guess I'm accepting the fact that a double-edged glalie, while it's nice to have, kind of has a potential impracticality to it, so I have to create a replacement while still holding on to it. That impracticality is basically that Pokemon from older generations in the 7th don't have a symbol that allows them to be, that indicates they were bred and created in the 7th gen. So while my current double-edged glalie is completely legitimate, I think it needs to go in the... It needs to go into the box of Pokemon that are questionable to use, either because they are fun ideas to have, but they break certain rules. For example, a Baton Pass, Quiver Dance, Ribombi. I think, yeah. You're really not supposed to be to do that by certain rule sets. Or a Poisonium Z... Oh, I can't remember its name. It's the little sea cucumber Pokemon. Basically, it can boost all of its stats by 1 and baton pass those to somebody else, and that's also a big no-no. And, it's nice to have some Pokemon that you hold on to that are like big no-nos, just in case you're up against somebody who's like, oh, let's go no bars hold, no nos allowed, or something like that. I want to be able to do that, just for shiggles. But, I don't know, now that I think about it, I'm kind of drifting off in conversation topic. I don't know. It's been one of those days where I had to remember that I need to make this video because I have the day off, and it's nice to zone out an extra day of the week, I guess. So I guess we'll find out next week if when this stuff arrives, and I think one of those is supposed to be Hyoka Part 1, Season 1, Part 1. I think there's only one season, but that's a high priority watch because I've seen too many gifs from that show to not be curious. And I would have hoped that it would arrive today, so I could have been watching it today, but it hasn't, so it isn't, so I won't. And that just means catching up on all this other stuff that has arrived and I haven't watched. Anyways, y'all, have a nice week and a happy Independence Day.